guys, I wanted to go over the activity that you just completed, just to give you a little more information on it and also to go over those answers that you have down to make sure that we all have a really good understanding of buying and renting a house. I know for a lot of you, this might seem very, very far away and something you might not have to think about for a while. And for some of you, this might be something that you plan on doing within the next year. So I want to give you as many tools and help you kind of by sharing what my experience was between renting and buying. Um, so yeah, so on this first page, hopefully you have clicked here and watched the video. If you haven't, please go back and do that. This video is a really awesome explanation of the difference between renting and buying and some of the things you want to consider. And then once you've done that, hopefully you have filled out this chart. So the first side says rent, the next side says buy. And basically, there's a couple things we want to consider. The video goes through them pretty quickly, so I wrote them down here. When you're renting, the three things they mentioned that are important to consider are the rent itself, so how much it costs, the insurance, and then the security deposit. So all in all, since those are things that are go by monthly, they're generally pretty cheap. When you're buying, the things you want to consider are your mortgage, so how much you're paying. Usually that includes part of a loan so that you can pay that amount. Your property tax, which can usually be pretty significant, and then your homeowner insurance, which we can all imagine would be much more expensive than renter's insurance. And then what I've asked you to do is write down some of the benefits of renting and buying, and then the disadvantages of both. I also included this infographic right next to it that I made that talks about a couple of statistics. So let me go over those. In the US, the average amount of people who are renting is about 37%. About 63% own their houses. The median age of a householder, usually renters, the median age is about 38, whereas owners are 41. I think a lot of us imagine that when we first start off, we usually start off renting. That's pretty common. Part of the reason that that age is lower for renters, but not always. Some differences between buying and renting. When you buy something, the home is actually yours. You have a long-term security in it. There's some benefits that come with them. The value of your home usually appreciates. So that means that you're not just putting money away and never seeing it again. When you go to sell it, you're going to get some money back for that time that you stayed there. Monthly pay and repayment for homeowners insurance, so you have some benefits, like I said. For renting, it's a little more flexible. You don't have a long-term commitment to a place. You pay the rent monthly, which is really helpful for a lot of people who are maybe living paycheck to paycheck, or just can't afford that big payment right now in that time in life. Let's see. They're able to live in an area which you could not afford to buy in. So, for example, right now I'm able to live in the village of Liverpool, which at the moment I don't have enough money to buy in. So I have a really awesome location without having the commitment of staying there or the property taxes that might come with them. The next section is about reading a lease that you might sign or a rental agreement. These are something that can look very, very foreign to us, and we want to make sure we know and understand what's going on in all of this paperwork. So the first question asks, what is the legal term for a landlord? That answer is a leaser or a lessor. And then for the tenant, so the person who's purchasing or staying in that place, it would be the leasee. These terms are really important to understand. I'll give you an example. When we were first renting our house here, I was reading through our agreement, and it basically said the leaser is in charge of doing the mowing. And I was like, oh, darn, we have to mow the lawn. And then my boyfriend was like, oh no, they mow the lawn. So it's important to know who's in charge of doing what so that you know, okay, I don't have to mow the lawn or I don't have to shovel because they're covering that for me. Okay. What is the minimum amount of money it will cost Amy to move into her apartment? The answer is $550. So this one's kind of tricky. It's not only her first month of rent that she's paying, but it's also the security deposit. That's always what's happening in your first payment. And her security department down in number 14 is going to be $200. So she pays that money, and with a security deposit, she's hoping that she gets that back after she moves out, as long as there's no damages. But that helps the landlord make sure if you do something, or if you just ditch, that they have some money to cover that. All right. Number 3, what is the term of the lease? Her term of this lease is 1 year. So that's the length of the lease agreement. She can probably renew it to add more, or she could sublet to get less. But at the moment, she's agreed to 1 year of living there. How far in advance does Amy have to report if she would like to move? So she has to report 30 days prior to doing it. She can't just up and leave. Think about those landlords, that may be their source of income. So if someone just ups and leaves and they don't have any income coming in, that could be really detrimental. So they are protecting themselves by making sure that you give them notice if you plan on leaving. To reduce the cost, Amy would like to share her apartment with a friend. According to her lease, can she? The answer is yes, she can. If we look in section number 1 there, that apartment can have 2 adults. So she would be able to live with a roommate. It would be up to her and the landlord to decide if the roommate pays half, or if the roommate's paying Amy. That would have to be disclosed a little bit further. Number 6, Amy uses her air conditioner for 2 solid weeks. As a result, the electric bill is doubled. Who pays the increase and why? So this is a good question. It's a good one to know. We know that Amy pays the increase for 2 reasons. 1, she's in charge of paying all of the utilities in the first place. We can see that in section number 10. She's in charge of paying the gas, heat, light, power, telephone, whereas the landlord is in charge of paying for the water, which is pretty common. So she's paying that electric bill anyways, even if she weren't. So for example, when I was in college, my landlord covered all of our utilities, which means he covered our electric. However, if we had the heat up in the middle of winter to 75 and spent way more on the electric bill than we were supposed to, our landlord would usually give us a little warning and say, turn it down. But if it happened again, we would have to pay, because that's extra money out of his pocket that he was not expecting. So that's why it's Amy for 2 reasons in that one. Number 7, the kitchen sink clogs up. It is the manager's day off. Rather than wait, Amy calls a plumber. Then in her next rent check, Amy withholds the cost of the repair. The manager demands full payment of rent. Who is right and why? So Amy clogged her sink. She doesn't want to call her manager, and she calls a plumber for herself, and then she takes out whatever she paid the plumber from her rent. There's a couple reasons she can't do this. Under number 10, we know that the landlord is in charge of any repairs to the premise. So he's the one who, if he chose to hire a plumber, or if he chose to fix it himself, he's in charge of doing that. So Amy has no right to do that. Also, Amy chose to go past the landlord and therefore can't take that money from him because they have this agreement. So the same thing goes, for example, if a toilet clogs and Amy needs someone to repair it, it is in charge of the manager to take care of that. A lot of places, specifically if you go and stay in a apartment complex, they have people who are on emergency call to come in and take care of those situations so that you don't have to do it. They might have an agreement with a plumber. There's so many reasons, but you never want to go over your landlord's head and make repairs to that apartment, because not only is she responsible for still paying her full months of rent, she's also making adjustments to that apartment that may not be approved by the manager. So that's that one. Number 8, can Amy sublet? Yes, she can, but she needs approval to do so. It says it with number 5. She shall not sublet without the leaser's written consent. So she probably could, but she still needs consent to do so. Lastly, can she take care of a dog for a friend who is going on a 2-week vacation? The answer is no. They should not keep, in number 2 here, they should not keep a dog, cat, parrot, or any other animal or bird. Doesn't really matter what length of time. A lot of that goes into the care of the apartment for when you move out, if you make a stain or if there's dog hair, lots of reasons. Do people always follow those? No, I can say for myself, we were not allowed to have dog in college. However, we definitely did babysit a friend's dog every once in a while. So it's not something I recommend you doing, but you are signing an agreement saying you won't. There's other rental agreements that might say you can have a dog, but you have to pay a pet fee, which is going to be $150 extra every month. So those things are flexible, but it's always up to that landlord. The next one's a matching section. So this one specifically has a lot of weird wording, and then it has the definition. So you click and drag those to match. So the first one's your security deposit. It says the lessor may apply all or any portion of the security deposit in payment of any amount due from the leasee. So some landlords refuse to return deposits, claiming unusual wear and tear or extra cleaning costs, regardless of the condition of the apartment. Renters have little protection against unfair withholding of security deposits, short of legal action. Number 2, condition of premises. Leasee has examined and knows the condition of the premises and has reviewed the same in good order and repair, except as herein otherwise specified. So this one, you have agreed to the apartment is fine shape. If you're satisfied with the apartment, and the apartment is okay, the landlord wouldn't have to do anything to improve it. If you later find that the dishwasher doesn't work, the landlord may or may not bother to repair it. So an example of this, when I moved into my apartment, you always want to go through the apartment before you agree to anything and make notes of things that are already damaged or things that are not right. Usually they'll fix it before you move in, but if they don't, you have documentation that whatever damage wasn't because of you and was there prior to you moving in. That helps protect you in case they were to say, that stain on that rug, you did that, and you can say, no, I signed this paper before I moved in that says it was here. Okay? The next one is subletting. The leasee will not sign this lease or sublet the premise without the written consent of the leaser. So you cannot sublet the unit to others in case you move before the period of lease is up. But the landlord must give written consent. The landlord has the right to approve or disapprove a prospective tenant. So to better define subletting is when you decide to leave wherever you're living early, but you're going to have someone else come in to help cover that cost of rent. If you don't sublet and you decide to leave early and you've already made a year commitment, you're losing all that money. You still have to pay rent even if you're not living there. So having a sublet makes it so that it's someone else's responsibility to pay that rent. It's basically giving that contract to someone else. Number 5, subletting the premise shall be occupied only by the tenant and the members of the immediate family of the tenant. So this is basically saying you can't have anybody sublet unless it's your immediate family. Number 6, repairs. Leasee agrees to repair all damage resulting from misuse or neglect. Upon leasee's failure to make such repairs after reasonable notice by the lessor may make such repairs, and the leasee shall be liable for any reasonable expense incurred. In this case, the renter will pay for damage he or she causes. Some leases make the renter's responsibility for all the repairs. Be certain the lease clearly states who's responsible for paying what. So we want to make sure that in our lease it says, if a tree falls in my yard, I'm not responsible. My landlord's responsible of taking care of it. Okay. Number 9, default by lease. If the leasee defaults in payment as set forth in the lease or in any agreement contained herein, it shall be lawful for the lessor or his representative to declare the term of the agreement ended, to re-enter the premise, and to expel or put out the lease and any other persons occupying the premise, using such force as he may deem necessary, and again response the premise. So what all that means, if the renter doesn't pay their rent or somehow elsewise violates that lease, the landlord can enter into the apartment, remove the renter and the belongings, and force them out of there. This doesn't happen often, but it can happen. Right of entry. The leasee will allow the leaser free access of premise at all reasonable hours for the purpose of inspecting the premise or to make any needful repairs. So this means the landlord can go into the apartment depending on when the reasonable hour is to check in on it and see how everything's going. So this next one was an option to watch. It's not a requirement, but this is Dave Ramsey. He talks a little bit more in depth about the difference between buying or renting a house. Hopefully you saw that it was optional, it's not required, but if you want some more information and some of the more nitty-gritty things about what to look at, hopefully you took a look at him. All right, and then last but not least, I'm asking for you to search for an apartment. So I listed some of the really popular apartment websites up there, and I've also given you the average cost of different utilities and other fees. So those are things like electric, heat, Wi-Fi, water, laundry, pet fees, the security deposit. Those are all things you want to keep in mind when you're moving in is, are those utilities covered in my rent? Do I have to pay them? That really adds up and makes a difference. So what I asked you to do is search for apartments in Liverpool. I gave you a budget of $700 to $1,300 on rent, but this includes utilities. So if you find a place that's $1,300 but does not include the cost of utilities, you are probably going to spend too much. The total cost must stay under $2,000. Don't forget to consider any additional fees that do not appear on the listing. $2,000 is very, very, very generous for all of this, specifically on people our age's budget. Okay, so down in that chart, I've asked you to give the address, list what the rent per month is, tell us how much that deposit is. Some deposits can be very, very expensive, so you want to know how much that is, specifically if you're going to apply to a lot of different places. Some places might not approve you based on your credit score. There's so many different reasons. The date it's available, the length of your lease. So is it a year long? How long is it? Number of bedrooms, baths, room size, on or off-street parking. This is an important one. We looked at an apartment down right across from Nichols, and that was one of my concerns, is there was only one parking spot and everything else was on the street. Some people don't want to park on the street. Your amenities are things that are included in your rent. So on here, hopefully you just put an X in that box saying what it does have. So when you're looking at it, you might want to know, does this apartment have air conditioning? Does it have a dishwasher? Maybe those are selling points for you. Other utility costs. So if your utilities are not added in your rent, then you want to put these here and then you come up with your total cost. Lastly, I've asked if you have any last questions for me. If you do, please let me know. I'm happy to either, maybe I'll make another TikTok depending on what you guys are looking for, but I'll do my best to try to get you those answers. So I hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for listening to me. Hopefully this makes a little more sense, and please let me know if you need anything.